everybody. Welcome back to Why We Love Horror. I'm JWMaher. Abby and Aaron are still enjoying Europe, but back with me again this week. So good. Jake Meltzer. Couldn't say no. He was great last week. How you doing, Jake?
Thank you. I'm doing really good. Definitely an interesting second movie that we're going to talk about today. I definitely have a lot of thoughts, more than you would think for how deep this movie is. But I'm excited to be here. I love talking movies just in general. This has been such a blast being able to do this these last couple of weeks. So while my time is short, it was fruitful. It's probably more entertaining to have Aaron and Abby here, especially Aaron with his flaming hot takes that I do not have normally.
Yeah. He even has his own graphics. Like when he goes off, I gave him graphics for that. But you don't rant it like Aaron does, and that's fine. And last week I had time constraints. I felt like I could have had you do even more. But this week the sky's the limit. And this week we are talking about A24's latest movie, and it is a horror movie, even though it's a comedy, I guess. Death of a Unicorn.
This entire nature preserve was donated by the Leopold. It's truly untouched by man.
Spotted any big game on the way in.
The fuck was that?
Must be moose mating season or something.
Aren't you the most magnificent thing?
Unicorns used to be seen like these divine monsters because people fully believe that they could heal literally anything.
It's an opportunity for immortality.
We have a moral imperative to harvest every last one.
They're gonna kill us.
Don't move.
Called it. There's no negotiating with monsters.
Right off the bat, I'll say title is actually misleading once you watch the movie. No spoilers there, but a small synopsis. This is across all genres, I'd say. And Jake, correct me if you feel differently. I think ever since like 2022, we've gotten like a larger amount of like boo capitalism movies, and this is just the latest. Like capitalism is fucking horrible movie. It's basically like there's a bunch of like mega billionaires, and the family of billionaires have a nature preserve, and Paul Rudd is their lawyer. And they're negotiating. The patriarch of the family is, almost like, was it not in sound mind to continue running the company due to progressed illness. So he goes there under the pretense of signing over the company as a trust to him. He brings his daughter, who he has some kind of strained relationship with, Jen Ortega. And they hit a unicorn with their car. And then you suspend disbelief, and the rest of the movie happens. Jake, your initial thoughts?
I would even go further back with your hypothesis about these boo capitalism movies. I would even go. I mean, they've kind of always been around, but when you talk about like a glut, and especially in the genre space, I think Get Out was kind of a turning point with this idea of these rich people clearly up to no good and oppressing other people in some way, shape, or form. Obviously, Get Out, it's very much a racial thing, and then you can go on and you can go into stuff like Parasite, which obviously not a horror movie, but I think probably the zenith of this idea. Yep. But to bring it way back down in terms of quality to Death of a Unicorn, I think when you talk about that idea and movies that tackle this, where it's a very popular idea to hate on rich people. Believe me, I am right there with those people. I think billionaires are categorically evil, but also like scarier than any killer unicorn or any other sort of monster. But as we can see in what's happening in our country today, I hate to get too political, but I'm sorry, that's the world we live in now. But to bring it back to this movie, when you compare it to some of the other movies that have tackled this idea with some degree of subtlety and sort of hard-hitting commentary, this movie is not that.
It is the opposite.
It's very much the opposite of that. It's very much paints these ultra capitalistic rich white people as broadly as you possibly can. And while it's clearly by design, I'm not sure it's really how I would respond in a positive way to that portrayal, considering, and it's unfortunate that like it's kind of, you see movies in the moment you see them when things are going on in the world, and it kind of clouds your opinion of the movie in a certain way. And maybe if this movie had come out in a different time, maybe even, let's say, like 4 years ago, 3-4 years ago, maybe I would have liked it a little more. Probably not, honestly, just because I think a lot of the execution is fairly pretty sloppy, quite frankly. But yeah, and it's interesting that you played the trailer that you did, because that trailer sells this as much more of a horror movie and not really as a comedy. But I think that that trailer is quite misleading, because I think this movie definitely wants to be more of an eat the rich kind of comedy with killer unicorns in it than a horror movie about killer unicorns that also happens to have class satire in it. And I kind of wish that was the case. That trailer makes it look like a more interesting movie than it really was. And it's a shame, because I've kind of rambled a little bit thanks to your more generous schedule this week. I'm taking kind of advantage of it. It's too bad, because it's a first-time director who's had some producing credits for some interesting horror movies you were kind of talking about earlier. This is his first. Alex Sharfman, I believe is his name.
Alex Sharfman, yep.
Yeah, a nice Jewish boy like me. Writing and directing this movie, and it felt like it's pretty clear that it's from somebody who has not done it, because it's trying to be a lot of things at once, and it doesn't really succeed at any of them, in my opinion. I didn't find the movie particularly funny. There are a few parts that are funny, and I think that's down to how good the cast is.
I think I would agree there. Like the potential of the cast is, like, the ceiling is immense.
I would say, with one major exception, the cast across the board is pretty good. And we can get into that in a little bit. I think we both had the same favorite actor and character in this movie.
That guy's great in everything, though.
He's great in everything.
Anthony Carrigan is great in everything. He just never stopped making movies.
We stand NoHo Hank on Why We Love Horror. And he is great, and I think his character, and it's kind of interesting because I think his character works the best, because I think the movie wants Jenna Ortega's character to be the sort of the POV character, the character or the audience avatar, but I think it's really Griff.
100%.
Like, it's really the character who is seeing all of this stuff happen. He's just like, fuck, man, I need this job. I put up with these clowns day in and day out because I need the paycheck, but I'm not here for all this mess. Like, this is too much for me. And
yeah, I would say if I compared the Leopold family to another horror movie family, they are the Ladomas family from Ready or Not. They are billionaires who don't fucking deserve it at all. They're just a bunch of ass clowns who have just lucked into this money somehow, and they're all equally horrible in different ways.
Oh, 100%. And having just rewatched Ready or Not very recently, that comparison feels really appropriate. But because Will Poulter, Tay Leone, Richard E. Grant are all so talented, like there are times where they just are really amusing in general. I think Will Poulter in particular is a really interesting actor. Like, to me, like I really, really loved him in Midsommar.
Yes.
Because he was hysterical in that movie. Absolutely a laugh riot. And he's brings almost all of the levity to that movie that's otherwise harrowing and incredible. And I love Midsommar as much as anybody, but it's just he was like like a best friend in a rom-com stuck in a horror movie, and it was really great. And then in this movie, he's just going completely broad, a complete doofus, like we've seen in some of his other work, whether it outside of horror, whether it's like We Are the Millers, or to a lesser extent when he played Adam Warlock in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Like he just he just can't help with like some of his delivery. He's just his voice and just kind of how nasal and annoying he is. He sounds, he can't help but be funny at points, even though like we're not supposed to like his character. And I'm not saying we're not supposed to like these billionaires. They're supposed to be terrible people, but I wish they had a little more dimension to them. They don't necessarily need to be sympathetic, but all of them are very one note. They all have one note to play. And I think at the very least, Ortega and Kerrigan are given more dimension. And I think that's why they're the two standouts. And then
Paul Rudd is here too.
I was going to say I've left out probably the biggest name in the cast, and I like Paul Rudd in general. I think he's actually a very good actor. Like, yes, he's pretty much since Anchorman, he's kind of been either in broad R-rated comedies or the MCU, and this is somebody who's like a classically trained stage actor who came up in the New York theater scene and is like doing serious theater. And then he's just kind of pivoted to this niche as kind of a goofy character actor who has leading man looks. Yep. And I just felt like he was really miscast. Either he was really miscast or this character was written very poorly.
Yeah, I see like the main character. I wish the dad was like not that Rick Moranis is still acting, but it feels like a Rick Moranis type should have played the lead character.
100%. That's a great call.
Like that's what we needed. Like we needed. I don't know who that is right now. Give me some time to think about it while we get into this plot a little bit. So they hit a unicorn with their car.
Yes.
And very quickly, we realize that the blood, saliva, DNA of the unicorns heals. It's a panacea. It heals everything. It heals. I'm not saying character. It heals Ridley, who's Jenna Ortega's acne. It heals Elliot's farsightedness and his allergies. And then, of course, the billionaires just pounce on this. After the unicorn it keeps coming back to life, which is like a big plot point later. Like we learn, and this is probably the biggest spoiler, that unicorns cannot die. And even if they do die, they are always on a path back to coming back to life. And therein, their DNA lies the secret to immortality, which of course the billionaires want to corner the market on. And that is the whole third act of the movie.
Yes. And like it makes sense that that's a way they would go. And I think like in Fitz, it's interesting and they get some good comedy out of it. I liked when at a certain point, I think kind of as you get into the third act, Will Poulter starts snorting powdered unicorn horn.
Yes.
it makes him smart. There's one scene where he's talking to his mom where he says, like, he's a doofus, and he's established as a doofus. He says something smart, and I forget exactly what he says, but it's something like, I'm a fucking genius now, Mom. And that part was that I liked that part of it. One thing that was interesting though, another character, one of the doctors, who's played by Sunita Mani, who's been in all kinds of stuff. I mean, she's been in Mr. Robot, she was in Glow, just to name two things that I've liked over the years. She's kind of the other character who's given a little bit of like, at first she's just like trying to stay on to like keep her job, but she gets a little bit of sort of sympathetic dimensionality, but then, and I think by design, again, spoiler, she's killed by one of the, spoiler, there are two other unicorns who are this other unicorn's parents that come along to get their baby back, so to speak. And they gore her to death, which
rip her in half. Yeah.
Yeah, and the gore in this movie is about what you would expect for a movie this broad. Like, but I'll say, I am very much someone who is anti-CGI in almost all cases. Like, to me, CGI should be the background, not the foreground. So I had kind of an issue with these unicorns, their design, the way they were deployed. I kind of wish they were a little bit more in the shadows. I mean, and they shoot at night to probably cover it a little bit, and they're dark.
I'd say this isn't bad CGI, but I agree that I wish they had gone more practical. This is like Smaug. They're Smaug all over the like they're smog level CGI. Yeah.
Yes, and I think it just an in general thing that my issues with CGI. I feel like it's barely evolved since Lord of the Rings. I don't think it's really gotten much better than that, or like I think probably, or even like a movie I don't love as much as everyone else in this community, but like Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest. Like CGI just has, but people use it a lot more now. They're using it to bring dead characters back to life, which don't even get me started on that whole thing. But anyway, in this,
Aaron has told us about Alien Romulus. We know.
That was. I didn't hate the movie, but man, that was rough. But yeah, in this particular case, I think it. I don't know if and I think this is kind of a central issue of the movie. It doesn't. I don't know if it wants to lean more into the comedy or more into the horror. And I think if it wanted to lean more into the horror, I think they would have made the unicorns more practical. Maybe it was a budget thing. I don't know. I looked up this movie. I had a $15 million budget, which is obviously not a huge amount when you consider some of the movies that use extensive CGI. But I can't help but compare it to another A24 movie that used quite a bit of visual effects at that budget number, but has incredible CGI, and that's Ex Machina. And maybe they just, with the budget that they had and the time that they had, they couldn't quite get it to.
I'd say both of those movies.
I want to give it the benefit of the doubt in that regard, but also I think it's clear, because you're going that way with the design and sort of the artificiality of it, that you definitely are going more of the comedic route instead of the horror route. And the horror route is really just these unicorns gore people and brutally murder them. And
I'd say like the two things that those two movies have in common is they're both not straight up bottleneck movies, but they're single location movies. Like they're not traveling all over the place. They're both set in like a singular property, both of those movies. So I guess they both have that going for it. And I thought about it. I answered my question. A smaller actor who I buy as Jenna Ortega's father, who doesn't necessarily have Paul Rudd's charisma that way, I would have bought Rami Malek as her dad. He's small enough to pull off that role, I feel.
Interesting. Going back to Mr. Robot. I guess he's just I guess he is. It's weird. He looks younger than he really is, but
They could have made him. They could have made him older. Yeah.
He is actually like 20 years older than her, so that actually might work. And yeah, because he's more of like you could see him as a suit, but also like he's a little more weird than Paul Rudd is, and you could understand him being a little bit awkward around his teenage daughter. Like, yeah, I could actually see that.
I'm available for casting. I'm available.
Yeah, I think it makes more sense than that movie I've seen an ad for before every movie for the last month and a half, where he's like a CIA nerd guy.
Where they do the whole thing from the mechanic all over again. Yeah, I know that. The amateur. But yeah, I think, like I said, this movie is not going to be, I don't think this movie's going to crack my top 10 this year, but I had a decent enough time. I think, like I said, it's a comedy, but it's not like the funniest movie I've seen this year. It's a horror movie. It's not the scariest movie I've seen this year, but there are enough things in this movie that I appreciate that I didn't hate it at all. I had a decent time. But I don't buy, and this is the spoiler of all spoilers, I don't buy ending it on a cliffhanger. And I also didn't understand why they would do that.
Yeah, that was very strange. That whole final scene, like, just from a story mechanic standpoint, I wasn't really sure what was happening there. And then, but I don't know if we want to like say everything that happens there.
We've done it before. Yeah, if you're still watching at this point.
Yeah, so one of the unicorns, or not one of the unicorns, Will Poulter's character stabs Paul Rudd in the gut and he dies, and then the unicorn heals him. One of the unicorns heals him, and because they have a bond with Ridley, his daughter, and then they leave this compound, and as they're driving away in a cop car, which this was part of my problem, like, so these unicorns are running alongside them and they knock this cop car into water. Isn't it like the idea is that it's supposed to be hard to get out of a cop car if you're in the back seat?
Basically killing them.
They're just going to drown, and I guess the idea is they're just going to revive them, the unicorns, because they like them. I don't know. It was very weird.
It's also like the unicorns were like they were so secretive, and like obviously nobody knew they were there. But now, just because these people are getting arrested, which means unicorns understand the concept of getting arrested, and they're going to save them from getting arrested by, like you said, like putting them in a situation that they can't possibly escape from. Nor do I think the unicorns can extract them from. So that is very weird. But hey, I don't make the money to write movies.
Yeah, is it they don't want people to know they exist, so that's why they're doing this? They trust Elliot and Ridley, but nobody else. Like, what about our guy Griff? Like, I feel like our guy Griff can keep a secret.
Oh, definitely, 100%.
But because he's trailing along, he's tailing along, and he's like, "Oh, what the hell is this? They're running along," and then like, I want to know what his reaction was to that. But like, yeah, we just don't get it. It just kind of ends with them getting knocked into an unidentified body.
We're not getting a sequel. I know that. I don't believe we are. That's unnecessary. But I guess we've talked the movie around. We can get to what we think about it. Let me pull up the old ratings clip here. I don't remember exactly what you rated it, but I'm going to guess that I'm a little more favorable than you. So you can go first, Jake.
Yeah, and this might even be a little bit generous on my part, but I think I like the cast enough that I was willing to be a little bit more forgiving with my rating. I ultimately rated it 2.5 out of 5. Just because, as we both established, we both love Anthony Carrigan in this movie and honestly anything. And I like all of the actors, even if I don't necessarily love what they're doing. I just think that overall the movie is a tonal mishmash. It has no subtlety whatsoever to its class commentary. And I think particularly in the era we are in, I expect a little bit more, and especially from A24, which I'm not as big a stan as Aaron, at least I'm not as vocal about it, but I am generally a huge fan of their output, particularly in the horror space. And I found this one really disappointing in that regard, because I usually, when I hear, an A24 horror movie, I'm like, ooh, yeah, sign me up. I got to be there. But this one, I was ultimately pretty disappointed by. I don't think I'm in no urge to revisit it. I didn't really respond to the comedy that much. I didn't really respond to the horror that much. I don't like CGI unicorns. I think that pretty much sums it up for me.
I think I'm a little bit higher. I went 3.5, which to me, as a horror fan, that's actually kind of damning, I guess. Because usually, if I really like a movie, it's 4, 4.5, or 5. I think all the pieces here are fine. There's nothing wrong with the pieces. I agree with pretty much everything Jake said. Like, the CGI feels, even though it's great CGI, it at times you're like, that is a fucking CGI unicorn walking down the stairs. I do like all the actors. They are giving it their all. I don't know if it's a director fault or whatever, but you're right. The film does feel incomplete, but I still had a good enough time, especially seeing a bunch of people I like: Will Poulter, Anthony Carrigan, Tay Leone did great. Richard E. Grant actually kills it too, because he basically plays two different characters. You have dying Richard E. Grant and living Richard E. Grant, so you get that. But yeah. So I mean, is it a movie that's going to make my top 10? Absolutely not. But did I hate it? No, nowhere near hating it. But we're going on to this week's Why We Love Horror Challenge. So we'll pull up that video as well. And if you want to play along, there's a website there on Letterboxd that has all 52 prompts for the year. It's a prompt a week. We're into like the 4th block of the year, week 13. And this was just watch a movie that has Barbara Crampton in it, who's done a great amount of work from the 80s all the way through You're Next and Suitable Flesh. She's still working, so you can get any age Barbara Crampton. And we ended on me, so we'll start with me. And I went ahead, and I had never actually seen basically what I'm now labeling as my second favorite people fuck around and find out, pulling S&M related demons from another dimension movie of the 1980s, From Beyond. Of course, I am talking about Hellraiser, which came a year later. Even though the source material for From Beyond predates Hellraiser by 50 years, the movies are eerily similar. So basically, if you liked Hellraiser but never got around to watching From Beyond, watch From Beyond and be like, holy shit, this was happening a year before. It's a very S&M heavy movie with Lovecraftian themes as well. I think it's a movie that a lot of people skipped, but I would suggest you stop skipping it. Go back and watch From Beyond. Jake?
I'm sold. Yeah, that sounds great. I actually picked a movie from the same year. So we both went young Barbara Crampton, who frankly doesn't look much different than old Barbara Crampton. I mean, she seems to not age and be beautiful at any age. But anyway, enough objectifying women, though maybe not from the movie that I picked, because I picked Chopping Mall, which I've heard a lot about as like a cult hit. So I just was like, okay, this prompt kind of got me to watch it. A lot of its appeal is it's also only 75 minutes long, and you get pretty much what you come for. This mall hires a new security force of advanced robots to be security for this mall, and things go haywire. The robots become killer robots, and they torment this group of teens who work at the mall, who stay after hours to do 80s teen things in a furniture store. And then, yeah, and this is kind of the platonic ideal of cheesy 80s horror, I think, from the amount of cheesy 80s horror I've seen, which is sadly not enough. But I've seen quite a bit, and I think this very much fits in with that. I mean, you get the teenage tomfoolery and debauchery that you get in these movies. I mean, considering the director of this movie went on to direct a bunch of softcore pornography after this. Usually you do that before, but in this case, he did it after. Kind of makes sense. And also Return of Swamp Thing, strangely. But anyway, Barbara Crampton is among these teens, and they are getting murdered by these killer robots in a variety of different ways. One thing but it's clear that the filmmakers are kind of in on the joke. I mean, it's sort of a Roger Corman-ish production. There's at one point, some of the characters go into a sporting goods store to pick up firearms, which okay, that they
That's
had
what they are.
they had firearms in malls in 1986. Yeah, couldn't happen today. But the name of the store is called Peck and Paws, which I found interesting, obviously in homage to the great director Sam Peckinpah. So it's like it's clear there's like they're having fun with this. They know exactly what kind of movie they're making, and and that energy is kind of infectious. Like I found myself enjoying it. It's very, very silly. The power level of these robots is very inconsistent. Like at one point they're like singeing a girl on her butt when they shoot her with their head lasers, and then they're blaming her face off like 30 seconds later. So it's just, but it's like you're not coming here for anything elevated of any kind like you would with your average A24 horror movie. This is just good cheesy 80s horror fun, and I had a good time.
Awesome. That'll do it for this week. If you made it this far in the video, like, comment, subscribe, and share. Go to the Facebook group at Why We Love Horror. I will throw the Letterboxd website up one more time. Go there, join the Letterboxd challenge, list your movies, share your movies. We want to know what you're watching as well. Schedule here is always the same. Sunday, my daughter does Why Liv Loves Horror. You should check that out. She's doing a great job, Liv. So later, when the years from now when I'm dead, you'll know on the internet that your dad loved you. Mondays, Will and I do a show that nobody is watching but Will and I. So thank you for not watching that. Thursday is Why We Love Horror. You're watching it. And Friday, Why We Love Horror Trivia, 2 episodes. This Friday is actually the Just the Clips Championship for April, and the second episode will be the overtime where we watch more clips. I want to thank Jake Meltzer for filling in these past 2 weeks. He's been great. Abby and Aaron are allegedly supposed to be back next week. We shall see. I do believe we're doing a movie that's coming out, which I forget what it is, but stay tuned to the Facebook page and we'll tell you what it is, because we're in a period now where horror movies are coming out every week.
If needed, happy to fill in though. Just saying.
So there's a chance that Jake might be here and he's happy to fill in. So you heard it here first. But until next time, this has been Why We Love Horror. We'll see you next week.